Waking up tomorrow and poof, no more Canadian maple syrup, no more Mexican avocados, no more beautiful maple furniture, or the part that makes your car run smoothly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. What if all imports from Canada and Mexico were cut off and the US was left to go it alone on its own homegrown product? Could America survive on just what's made here? Well, Trump has made it clear a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods could be the first step towards that future. Let's break it down and see what would happen if the US tried to live without its two biggest trade partners. First things first, let's talk about just how intertwined the US is with Canada and Mexico when it comes to trade. In 2022, the total US-Canada trade was a whopping $908 billion. Out of that, the US exported $427 billion in goods and services to Canada and imported $481 billion. Yeah, that's a trade deficit of $53.5 billion. But let's not get bogged down in the details. The bottom line, without Canada, a lot of products simply would not make it onto US stores. Take oil, for example. Canada is the US's largest supplier of crude oil. About 60% of the oil the US imports comes from the Great White North. That's nearly 3 million barrels a day. No more Canadian oil? No problem, right? Well, not exactly. The US would have to ramp up its domestic production to replace that. But could they? And at what cost? Trump's drill baby drill mantra sounds great, but can the US really make up that much ground without relying on imports? Now, let's move to Mexico, which is equally important. In 2022, the US had a $131 billion trade deficit with Mexico. The US imported $493 billion in goods from Mexico, including auto parts, electronics, vegetables, and a whole lot of avocado toast ingredients. And here is where things start to get tricky. Mexico supplies roughly 80% of US vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, basically everything that makes your Taco Tuesday feels like an Olympic event. So what happens when that supply chain is cut off? You've got a hungry, angry nation and more expensive grocery bills. Without Mexican import, US farmers and companies would need to ramp up production, but that takes time. And what about the parts for US cars? Cars are about 25% more expensive when we talk about Mexico's role in making things like transmission, electrical wiring, and other essential components. So imagine your car's price tag going up and up and up. The problem with America first. So let's picture it. America's factories working overtime to meet demand. America first, right? Well, hold on. The problem is the America's manufacturing capacity is not set up to produce all the goods currently being imported. According to data, US manufacturing just is not geared up to replace all of these imports. For example, the US only produces about 40% of the auto parts it needs. And when it comes to electronics, forget about it. A huge chunk of these components come from, yep, you guessed it, Canada and Mexico. And let's not even get started on the Chinese-made electronics that flood the market. Even if US manages to boost its own production, it could take years to catch up. And in the meantime, what happens to the consumer prices? Well, brace yourself. Inflation is about to make a comeback. So here is the million-dollar question. Can the US actually survive without imports from Canada and Mexico? Sure, in theory, the US could start building more and manufacturing more. But there is a catch. US does not have enough workers. Despite efforts to bring back manufacturing, labor shortage persists. Plus, the cost of labor here is higher than what you would pay in Mexico or in Canada. If you want cheap goods, you need cheap labor. Simple as that. Trump's 25% tariffs might seem like the key to bringing all manufacturing back to the US, but the reality is much murkier. Those tariffs are just the tip of the iceberg. The bigger question is, Will the US be able to sustain domestic production without helping of its two closest neighbors? Here is where innovation comes into play. The US would need to massively increase automation to keep up the demand and reduce labor costs. Yes, we are talking about robots, AI, and a lot of investment in technology. But that does not happen overnight. And let's not forget energy. Canada supplies a massive chunk of the US energy supply, about 60%. The US can try to increase domestic production of oil and gas, but with environmental regulation, fluctuation in prices, and climate change concerns, it's not as easy as just flipping the switch. Now, let's talk about you, the consumer. Without Canada and Mexico imports, it's going to hurt your wallet. Prices will skyrocket for everything from your groceries to your new car. And forget about cheap electronics. You will be looking at luxury price tags for these basic items. So, what does that mean for everyday American? If tariffs keep going up, the cost of living could rise faster than wages. It's the perfect storm for inflation. And who's going to pay the price? The average consumer, as always. Cutting off imports from Canada and Mexico could lead to some serious short-term pain for the US economy. Sure, that's potential for more domestic production, but the reality is that it would take years, even decades, to replace all the imports. Labor shortages, skyrocketing prices, and economic uncertainty would be the immediate consequences. And don't forget, the energy crisis could also become a real issue. But hey, America has always found a way to bounce back, whether it's through innovation or sheer willpower. This country has the potential to adapt. The question is, can US do it fast enough before it feels the full brunt of these tariffs? What do you think? Will America survive without Canadian and Mexican imports? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content about how these trade issues will shape the future. Until next time, stay informed, stay resilient, and remember, in the global economy, everything is connected. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.